Hey folks, this is Rhykker, and Blizzard's going to charge $100 for the first Diablo 4 expansion. Or at least that's what people are telling me. A couple weeks back there was a leaked survey. I thought we were done with that. We spoke about that in this video over here, but lately people have been asking me, like, this is news now, what do you think about Blizzard charging $100 for the expansion? And it turns out that YouTuber Legendary Drops released a video recently on the topic of the worth of an expansion, and Asmongold reacted to that. So we are now going to react to Asmongold's reaction. Why aren't we just reacting to the original video? Because Asmongold is also adding some thoughts to. So we're going to have an elaborate, not conversation amongst the three of us right now. Links to both Asmongold's and the original video in the description. I encourage you folks to watch both in full. As usual with my React content, I will not be posting in full their content. If I don't have anything of value to add to a certain section, I'm going to cut that out. And I encourage you to go check out the full video so that you can't just watch my video and then feel like, well, I don't have to watch those videos now.
So recently there was a consumer poll that was released by Activision Blizzard that was asking customers whether they were okay with spending $50 to $100 on a Diablo 4 expansion with a bunch of extra bells and whistles.
A very normal price for an expansion, $100.
Realize
as a point of clarification, and Bellular, I believe, was the one who actually first leaked this this survey. He says someone sent it to him and he leaked the survey. These are always sent out. Anyone who fills them in, they're instructed to not share them. So for whatever that's worth. What the contents of the survey were, would you buy the expansion at this price if it included XYZ extra doodads and add-ons? And honestly, the bigger story that I thought that came out of this was not so much the price point, because it's all based on the add-ons, but rather the potential pay-to-win stuff that was in there, which again, we addressed in this video over here.
a lot of people have already discussed this. I'm going to be talking about something a little bit more unique.
Fair.
I'm not going to be talking about how disgusted I am with their idea of doing it in the first place.
Yeah.
No, I'm asking what makes them think Diablo 4 is even worth it in the first place.
Interesting.
Because people are dumb and they spend money. That's the reason why. It's really not that complicated. It's not that hard to understand. People are just dumb.
He has a point, right? People ask, what is something worth? Something is worth whatever people are willing to pay for it. You know, why do MTX, why do cosmetics and whatever, why do people charge so much for these things? Because people are willing to spend the money. It's as simple as that. They wouldn't get away with these prices if people wouldn't be willing to spend the money. That's the reality of the way capitalism works.
Diablo 4 struggled to retain its player base. Players began voicing concerns over various aspects of the game, including its lack of depth in gameplay, end-game content variety, no meaningful crafting, lack of storage, poor build variety, and overall replayability began all to surface at once. The players spoke louder than words. A steep decline in active player bases were observed shortly after the game's launch. The exit.
Well, okay, so everything he said was true. All those complaints did emerge. Basically, he started by saying that when the game released, it was, you know, everyone loved it, and it took a good month or so before we started to notice, okay, well, now all the complaints are surfacing now that people are past the campaign. They're exploring the endgame. They're well into it. Now they realize, oh, well, there's some issues, there's some stuff missing, there's more than we need. I just hope we're not going to point to the fake player numbers again. This is a pet peeve of mine when numbers are thrown around that are not real numbers. We did a previous React video. There are no public player numbers for D4. And we could infer that player counts dropped dramatically, and they probably did, but there is never any way for us to know what those player numbers are. Any website that claims is complete BS. There is no... Blizzard does not reveal these numbers. They stopped doing that many, many years ago with World of Warcraft when they started to notice that their share value was being affected by them releasing these numbers. So it's been everything is under wraps, under lock and key. These numbers are in no way public. Again, I'm not disagreeing with the statement that the numbers most likely and anecdotally and everything that we could see as users on our end, it did seem to corroborate with a dramatic drop in player base, but there were no actual numbers that we can use to back this up. And if you're going to point to Twitch numbers and stuff, we'll probably talk about that later, but those are not player count numbers.
Exodus was not merely a fluctuation in numbers, but a clear indication that Diablo 4 was not living up to the community's expectations.
True.
I just don't really see why people would spend time on Diablo 4 whenever PoE 2 is out. Like, I just think PoE 2 is going to be better than Diablo 4 in every single way. Like, I can see why somebody plays Diablo 4 over PoE 1. I can totally understand that. There's a lot of reasons. Completely understandable. But PoE 2?
It's an unknown, right? It's going to be, PoE 2 will be D4's biggest competition for sure, but the key is going to be the casual player base. And I don't know. So to answer Asmongold's question, why would anyone play it? Because Diablo is a more casual friendly brand. Maybe PoE 2 is going to be more accessible. I mean, it's definitely going to be more accessible than PoE 1. If someone tries to get into PoE 1 right now, it's very inaccessible given how much there is. PoE 2 will be more accessible just because it has less in it at launch. But I still suspect that D4 is going to win with the casual base. People that just want to chill. They just want a game that they don't have to think too hard. They don't want to be challenged too much. They just want to kill some demons. I think D4 is probably still going to win in that regard, but we'll have to see when PoE 2 actually releases.
Numbers alike expressed their disappointment. Comparisons were inevitably drawn to earlier entries and other titles within the genre, with many feeling that Diablo 4 lacked the captivating magic and complexity that had once defined the genre.
There did feel like there was something missing, for sure.
As we delve deeper into the controversies surrounding the upcoming expansion and its pricing, it's crucial to understand this backdrop. Diablo 4, a game launched with promise and potential, now stands at a crossroads. Its future hinged on how well it can reconcile with the past.
I think that if they keep releasing seasons, if Diablo 4 keeps releasing seasons like Season 2, the game will be good. I enjoyed playing Diablo 4 in Season 2. I had fun in the game. I don't think that it has anywhere near the level of content or depth or excitement that PoE has.
Of course, yeah.
But I still had a lot of fun playing the game. And it was enjoyable enough for me to go back probably in Season 3 and at least try it again.
Be aligned with...
Yeah, so for anyone who has not tried Season 2, it dramatically improves. I believe that if Season 2 was Season 1, if we didn't get the Season 1 that we got and instead got Season 2, I think the whole D4 bad meme would not have picked up the way it is. Is it perfect? No, there's still some fundamental underlying issues with D4 that we've previously discussed. Itemization is my biggest one, and that's coming up for a massive rework in Season 4. Fingers crossed that's going to be... That's the Loot 2.0 that I've been hoping for. The Loot 2.0 that saved D3, for instance. But, yeah, Season 2 has been a tremendous improvement over Season 1. If we keep getting bangers like this, yeah, give it a year or so, and D4 is going to be in an excellent position. Now, you can argue, well, why didn't it launch that way? And that's fair, right? Why not have delayed the game an extra 6 months or whatever, or go through, because you can argue, well, it wouldn't have changed anything because it took community feedback to shape the game. And it's very true that the community has immensely impacted how the game has evolved since launch. In which case, well, you could have done like a really long, full beta period instead of just the first 20 levels or whatever it was, do a full beta and then, do a full launch after like 3, 4, 6 months of this full on open beta. Those are legit things, right? I'm sure there's business reasons. I'm sure the devs probably wanted more time, but whatever the case is, what happened. Game was not as good as it could have been. It's been steadily improving. As for how much content there is in it, I'll always think that it's unfair to compare the amount of content in a newly released game to a game that's had 10 years worth of content added into it. Literally no ARPG ever will ever have as much content as PoE. They're content beasts. They've been doing it for a decade. I honestly believe there will never be another ARPG with as much content as PoE has now. Maybe PoE 2, even that though. We can dunk on D4, all we want. The reality is it launched at D4's launch. It had more content in it than any ARPG ever has. Maybe you didn't like that content. Maybe it still wasn't enough, and it still wasn't enough. I agree, but it still launched with more content than any ARPG has ever launched with. That said, once Last Epoch releases, it's gonna get that title. Last Epoch launching early next year.
Just being
honest.
The
launch and the issues that follow have me sitting here scratching my head as to why Blizzard would believe that Diablo 4, an expansion for the game, would be worth the same price as the box price for the game. But why would the players want to invest in a game that didn't meet their expectations the first time around? And it's not like the game has really recovered since then. Even more so, think about the value proposition. Why would you want to charge $50 to $100 for a game where you have competition that's out there right now that's providing a more engaging and more fulfilling experience for far cheaper or even free?
Yeah,
exactly. In the competitive landscape of action RPGs, Diablo 4 is not an isolated phenomenon. It exists alongside notable titles like Path of Exile, Grim Dawn, and Last Epoch. Each one of them.
It's also like, for a long time, I don't think that really, like, Diablo 4 doesn't really need to compete a lot against PoE 1, I don't think.
Correct.
And the reason why is that Diablo 4's graphics are a lot better than PoE's graphics, and people perceive that as being a better game, especially in a very, very large mainstream audience. Grim Dawn is too small to even be a competitor or something that's worth talking about.
Well, so what he's saying is true. I'm just going to soften that by saying it's worth talking about in that it's a game that it has merit. It's a great game. It has an expansion coming out next year. It's worth checking out. It is dated, however. It is very much a current gen. At this point, it's a last gen ARPG. Even with the expansion, it's still going to be a last gen ARPG. It's a small company, small game, small footprint. It's never going to compete with Diablo 4 or PoE 2. Still a great game and a great team behind it. They just don't have the marketing, the budget to compete graphically, as I was going to call him Asmongold says here. But I think graphics probably isn't the main reason people aren't jumping to PoE. It's really just, it's the new player experience. It's just, oof. It's, PoE 1 has this reputation of being this, it's right up there with EVE Online, Spreadsheet Simulator, kind of like, people know. It has a reputation of this game is, whoa, you need a PhD kind of thing.
Epoch, I think, is a great game, but it also still doesn't have that high-quality AAA polish that people perceive good games to have.
It's really improved. Last Epoch has tremendously improved throughout its development. It's right there. It's definitely, it doesn't feel like an indie game. It feels like a solid AA game. For what they have done with the resources they have, and this being their first game, they've done better than pretty much anyone can be expected to have done in their position. I think Wolcen actually was the only ARPG to feel like a AAA visually from how it looked before you started getting in the car and noticing, oh, well, the door just fell off, the tire is flat. Wolcen ended up having a whole... Wolcen was really frustrating for me personally because the build that I played pre-launch did not have... it had a couple of little bugs, but then once it launched and with the multiplayer and everything, all the bugs emerged. And I realized why that was the case in the months and years that followed, because what would happen with Wolcen, they put out a big patch and it fixes everything. Then a few months later, they put out a content patch and everything's broken again. And then they take a few weeks to fix everything. Everything's perfect, or well, close enough. New content drops, boom, everything's broken again. So I happen to get it on the everything is fixed side of things right before the main content dropped and everything broke again. But otherwise, yeah, Last Epoch, when it releases, I don't think it's going to compete with D4 just because of the scale of D4 versus the scale of a new indie game. But I think it's going to be a respectable entry into the franchise, and I think it's going to be able to propel the team forward such that their next game, their next title, be it Last Epoch 2 or whatever, that's going to be the AAA level of polish. I believe Last Epoch is going to be very successful and is going to be very well regarded in the ARPG genre. When we're talking about like hundreds of or tens of millions of sales like D4, that has to extend outside of the ARPG genre, right? When you talk about D4 and people playing it, you're not just talking about the ARPG tryhards. It reached MMO players, it reached people from all outside of the genre. And that's just because of the Diablo brand and its Blizzard and all of their advertising and marketing and 20 years of brand recognition. Everyone knew that D4 came out. A tiny fraction of those people are going to find out about Last Epoch.
And I will play Last Epoch at some point, right? I want to, at least. So it's not like I don't want to play the game because of that, but like I can just acknowledge that the average consumer doesn't see things that way. And
let me add this. So at Gamescom, I was invited to work the Last Epoch booth. So I went to Germany, Gamescom during the summer, and I got to be there and see people's reactions to Last Epoch. And we had people who had played ARPGs before, people who had not, and universal praise for the game. Now, we have to admit a certain degree of bias that, like, maybe in front of us, they didn't want to say negative comments. That's fair. It's a legitimate point. But nonetheless, any comparisons made to D4 always spoke more positively of Last Epoch. And this was about a month after the launch of Season 1 of D4, if I remember correctly.
I think with Diablo 4, it's the exact opposite, right? Is Diablo 4 looks really good. It has a very, very like surface level compelling reason to play it. And because of that, I think that's why you see so many people that are just like casual gamer dads that are playing the game.
Yeah.
Them bringing a unique flavor to the genre. So let's take a closer look at how Diablo 4 stacks up against some of these competitors.
Yeah.
First, there's Path of Exile, a game renowned for its deep character customization, intricate item systems, and free-to-play model that respects players' choice. It has set a high bar for what players expect in terms of content richness and engagement without heavy monetization, with arguably one of the better free-to-play models that are out there.
True.
It doesn't have one of the better free-to-play models that's out there. It has the best free-to-play model that's out there.
Yeah.
It's literally the best. Period.
With now over 10 years of continued support for Path of Exile, it's stacked with endgame content systems and a variety of builds, items, and more. Then we have Last Epoch, a newer entrant, yet making significant waves with its engaging time travel storyline, arguably the best crafting system in ARPGs, satisfying combat mechanics, and a transparent development process. It's a testament to how indie studios can compete in a space that's dominated by bigger players.
I think that you guys got to keep in mind
the space. In the ARPG space, I wouldn't say it's dominated by bigger players. The RPG space is a very minor space. The only real big player, I mean, you got Blizzard, and then GGG became one of the big players. They started off as one of those indies, but Path of Exile by itself is a testament to how you can dethrone the king. But if you're talking about bigger player in just the greater gaming landscape, yeah, absolutely.
Grinding Gear Games used to be an indie studio. Back in the day, like, you know what PoE advertising was?
Why did I even bother saying
Chris Wilson talking to Kripparrian. So yeah, we're gonna make this game, and it's gonna have like a bunch of different skills, and there's gonna be like different worlds in it, and you go to like these maps, and Crip's like, oh, that's cool. Oh yeah, yeah, this is kind of like Diablo 2. Yeah. Did you play that? Like, yeah, I played it. Yeah, and that's it.
Yeah,
right?
I played.
And so that's how.
For anyone who doesn't know, PoE was born out of an absolute love of D2. I guess I'm not going to say I don't know that no one has played more D2 than Chris Wilson, but I don't think anyone has analyzed D2 as much as Chris Wilson. I don't think the D2 devs analyzed D2 as much as Chris Wilson did.
Comparing these games, several key factors emerge. Firstly, the depth of gameplay. Both Path of Exile and Last Epoch offer a level of complexity, depth of content, and customization that keeps players engaged for the long term.
Sure.
Whereas Diablo 4 does not.
Well, I also want to keep in mind that like the complexity that Diablo 4 provides, the complexity that it doesn't provide is valuable for a lot of people. There are like, I'll give you an example.
Casual players,
Escape from Tarkov. Now, I didn't, like, one of the reasons why I didn't get into that game is because of how complex it is. But it's much easier for me to get into a game like PUBG. But like Escape from Tarkov is hard to get into because of how complex it is. So the complexity isn't always a positive, and sometimes it's actually, in fact, a negative.
Yeah, I guess to add to what Asmongold said, complexity does not necessarily make a game better. Depth generally does, but there's a difference between depth and complexity as well. I do believe that within this genre of game, an ARPG, in order to have longevity, in order for the game to be a game that you play every season, every day, even for years, it does need depth. It absolutely needs depth. But in theory, there's nothing wrong with having a shallow game that is just a short experience. You play it once, you're done, and that's it. But if you're trying to be, that forever kind of game, you do need more depth to keep things interesting. so that players have content and things to think on that they continue to uncover as they keep playing the game.
The gaming community has voiced its opinion loud and clear. While Diablo 4 has its strengths, particularly in its narrative and visual representation, it falls short in areas where Path of Exile and Last Epoch excel.
True.
This raises...
Which is, again, that's not really a bad thing. Like, they're never... like,
it's a bad thing for what a lot of core ARPG players want, what a lot of ARPG veterans desire. But again, it comes down to what is the audience that you're selling the game to? Who is your target demo? Are you making a game for the grognards, for the tryhards? Are you making a game for the casual masses? For instance, D3, very shallow game, sold exceptionally well and continued despite having basically seasons that do nothing for the longest time, very little changes, continued to see significant numbers of players coming back every season.
Realistically, Blizzard is never going to be able to compete with PoE in terms of complexity or pace of content. It will never happen.
Questions about the sustainability.
So, I do believe Blizzard, if they wanted to, could compete with PoE with regards to content or pace of content. I don't think they will. But in theory, I mean, just you throw enough money at something and you could crunch out more content, right? I don't think they desire to, and I don't think that they should, but in theory, they could.
Understanding this competitive landscape becomes crucial. It's not about the price tag. It's about the value that the players perceive they are actually getting for their investment. Path of Exile offers bossing, maps, heists, labyrinths, delves, simulacrum, uber blight, crafting, a rich player economy, and the list can go on and on.
That guy, the
all
trial
kinds of different
master.
activities for players to take part in throughout the entire game. Last Epoch gives each skill its own skill tree, multiple specializations per class, an intuitive crafting system, and its unique...
I'll repeat, I've been repeating this for years. Last Epoch has my favorite skill system of any ARPG ever. Their active skill system, every single skill, like here, has its own skill tree. I love this, and it's insane to me that no one has tried to steal this and beat them to launch. I would want every ARPG from now on to use this system. Like, this is the template. This is what people should be doing.
Endgame system called the Monolith. To my knowledge, Diablo 4 offers a barren open world, chaos dungeons, and a couple of bosses that you can use for target farming. Path of Exile and Last Epoch are objectively better games, in my opinion. They offer far more content, more player agency.
He added, in my opinion, which is fair. Like, objectively better, I mean, objectively better is based on what criteria are you valuing the game on, right? Someone else, and I wouldn't be saying they're correct, but someone else can say, well, the graphics in D4 are better than in Last Epoch. The cinematics are better. The story is better. Therefore, the game is objectively better. But he qualified it with his opinion. So he absolutely, within the metrics and criteria that he listed, is fair to say that those games are better than D4.
More endgame systems, more items, more everything that you would want out of an ARPG, whereas Diablo 4 does not. And
I actually kind of disagree with this on an absolute level, but I think from my perspective and from his perspective, he's right. Because, like, I think that...
Asmongold and I keep saying the same thing.
For example, like, I think Fortnite is a better game than PUBG, but PUBG is more complex than Fortnite. At least no-build Fortnite. So, like, more complexity doesn't make a better game, and I think a simpler game is also good. But that doesn't necessarily mean that, everybody wants a simple game or a complex game. I think
another example would be, like, so you can have a game, imagine an RPG with much more shallow mechanics, but a wide variety of fun activities to do. You can see that appealing to a segment of people that, they just like killing monsters and they're bored of doing the same, like, rifts or dungeons over and over. But, like, here's, like, 10, 20 different potential fun activities that do different things. But, like, the character builds themselves, whatever might be shallow.
These games are offering that for anywhere from $40 to absolutely nothing.
Yeah.
So it doesn't make a lot of sense to me as to why players would be interested in a Diablo 4 expansion if it was heavily priced. And this is where I think Blizzard is starting to stumble. And while I realize it's their MO to try to take every bit they can and squeeze as much as they possibly can, my question is, what makes them think their game is worth that price in the first place when they're already still on cleanup from the launch?
Because the reality is that the people that are unhappy about Diablo 4 are a minority. And a lot of the people that hear about Diablo 4, like, they're watching the big game on Sunday, and they saw a commercial for Diablo 4, and they went and they bought the game at Walmart. Like, there's a lot of them, and, like, you're never going to reach the super...
It's true. I think he's about to make this point, but yeah, the average D4 purchaser probably never played the game enough to reach a point where the problems became apparent to them. It is probably fair to say. Average purchaser of D4 maybe got through the campaign, probably never hit level 50, probably was completely content. They stopped playing, they moved on after, a lot of people will just buy a game, they play through the story, and they're content with that. And from that regard, D4 delivers. And that's why they're not giving the game away for free, because they are a premium product from a premium brand, from a premium company, and they're selling a premium experience with full-on voice acting and CGIs and this and that. And it's everything after that falls apart, which is why I feel that a good model would be a business model. I think a business model that might work would be you sell the campaign, whatever, as a box product, and then you have like the free version of the game that is just adventure mode. It's just non-campaign. That's the content that you monetize, right, with your battle pass and whatever, but that is accessible for free. Because that's one of the unfortunate realities about this game and this genre of game. Some people are buying it just like an RPG, right? If you're not an ARPG enthusiast who wants to play this game for the rest of their lives, like me, you just buy it as an RPG. And what do you do with an RPG? You play through the story and you're done and you're content with it. Maybe you make another character, you play through it again, whatever. I remember a statistic from, it's a decade ago. I don't know how relevant it still is today, but you looked at Steam stats, you looked at statistics, the average amount of time any given gamer spends on a game was 8 hours. And that's why we were seeing a reduction in the length of campaigns in AAA games, with Call of Duty being the big example. They're making shorter and shorter campaigns because why make a 20-hour campaign when the average player, the average person who's purchasing your product, is only spending 8 hours on it? You realize, oh, well, we only need 8 hours worth of content. If the average consumer is only playing our game for 8 hours, that's as much content as we need to keep them buying our next game.
And that's what has me scratching my head. Blizzard should be on the apology tour still.
Really? Yeah.
They're not out of the hole yet. So this very much feels like a situation where it's the...
I mean, it's the difference between making a game and making a product is what it comes down to. GGG... They were an indie company. They have full control over themselves, at least they did for the longest time. I believe they're entangled with Tencent now, but I forget if they are fully owned by Tencent, but I believe they're still given pretty much full autonomy to run things as they want. So GGG could have gotten greedy. They could have tried to maximize profits, and they decide not to. They're content with making the ton of money that they are making, with the model that is very friendly to the consumer. You look at a game released by Blizzard, and the devs have no agency and control over how it's monetized. They are within a corporate machine. And the executives at the top are not going to be deciding, well, yeah, you know what, we can go for a much less profitable model because our devs really want to do that and really want to be nice to the players. Like, I get the point, but does anyone really think that within the structure that Blizzard is caught in, where they're under layers of bureaucracy that goes all the way up to, historically Bobby Kotick, right, where it's just executives and just people there to manage businesses and make money, is one of those people up there going to greenlight, just make less money, that's fine. To them, it's just a product. To the devs, it's their heart, they're pouring their hearts into this, but at the top, the people that have all the biggest decisions to make, it's just a product.
Tail wagging the dog. Yeah. They're going for the money, but they're not actually offering any value in return. And we're not talking about a game that has popularity now.
Yeah.
Its popularity's already dead, and that's something we're going to talk about here in a minute. So that's what makes it even more confusing. Blizzard is aiming to have Path of Exile's monetization strategy bolted onto a full-price title and a full-priced expansion. That in and of itself is absolutely absurd. But the one thing that I haven't really seen a lot of people discuss is whether or not Diablo 4 even deserves to have that kind of monetization.
I don't think that even matters. Like, to me, it's all about the gameplay.
That's the issue. And so, okay. People frequently come and ask me, like people who haven't bought D4 yet, they come and ask me, is it worth buying D4? And here's the reality. I don't know how much you value a dollar. No one can tell you whether something is worth something without understanding what is $1 to you, what is $10 to you, what is $100 to you. Are you the kind of person that is content to spend $70 on the latest Call of Duty, play the campaign, and then never touch the game again? Are you someone that expects to get 1,000 hours of gameplay out of a game? Like, it needs to be a conversation of understanding what you want and what you feel things are worth, because people are wildly on different spectrums here. People are in different financial situations. People are from different countries where the value of $1, some people have to spend like a month's salary on a freaking video game. But ultimately, I agree with Asmongold's point that it doesn't matter whether they deserve to charge X amount. That's just not how economies work. No economy is based off of, well, does this product deserve to charge that amount? At the end of the day, it's the market that decides. It's whether people are willing to fork over that money. And the way things work is people keep charging more until people stop accepting it. That is when it's determined that, no, you don't deserve to charge this because I stopped paying it. So I encourage anyone who objects to something's pricing model, don't buy that thing. Speak with your wallet. That's literally the only power that we have. Don't buy something if you feel it's overpriced. Some necessities in life, you have no choice. A video game is not a necessity. We need food. We need shelter. We don't need entertainment. There's plenty of free entertainment out there. People managed to survive without TV and video games in the past. Support indie devs. Support people whose pricing models you agree with. But the objective of corporations under capitalism is not to charge what is ethically correct. It's to charge whatever they can get away with. And we are the ones that let them get away with it. We are the ones ultimately accountable. We are the ones that establish, yes, this is worth this. Keep upping those prices.
And I'm talking about that not as just a player, but also
Unique
somebody
amazing.
that
Yeah,
will be working at a game studio themselves.
I don't have that right now.
Because they should be asking that themselves. Path of Exile is...
Yeah, but the people working at the game studio have no agency to exert their will, right? If you're working at GGG, maybe, but like once you're in a big corporate machine, like what's a level designer going to do to help establish the price point of a game?
Filled with microtransactions. There are tons of different things that you can buy, but Path of Exile is free to play. It's filled with content. It has a ton of value to provide for players.
Yeah.
Whereas Diablo 4 has nightmare dungeons and some of the worst boss design that I've seen in years. You can't even see Lilith's attacks. You're bringing nothing to the table and expecting everything in return. I'm sorry, Diablo 4. You're not that pretty.
There it is.
I believe Blizzard's monetization...
And it's totally fair for him to have that opinion. But other people might feel like they're getting their money's worth and they're happy to fork over more. And that's the thing with opinions. Now, to me, the bigger question is, you know, if all this is true and everything is logical, right? If everything is true that D4 has nothing to offer and it's overpriced and there are other alternatives that are better in every way and more ethical and better monetized, then why isn't everyone playing those games instead? And you can argue part of the answer is, well, the bigger marketing budget. Again, what we highlighted earlier, Diablo is just a bigger brand, and that maybe if people did play PoE and did play Last Epoch, then they would not want to play D4 anymore, and that's possibly part of it. And it's why we got to keep talking about all these other great ARPGs that are out there and make people aware, but that can't be the entirety of it, and it has to be that there are people that are perfectly content with what they got with D4, or at least with where things are going, and that they feel that they did get good value for their money. While I don't think D4 is a perfect game by any means, I got my money's worth out of D4. I don't regret the money that I spent. I got hundreds of hours of entertainment. I'm continuing to. I'm at the point of getting bored with Season 2 now, but Season 2 lasted far longer for me than Season 1 did.
I think that if Diablo 4 releases 3 or 4 seasons that have the same quality as Season 2, people will buy an expansion for $70. I genuinely believe that. Because for a lot of people, it will be worth it to them.
I don't disagree. I do think, so I guess now I'm injecting my own opinion here. I do think $70 is overpriced for an expansion. I'm wondering if I should explain now how I feel or wait for... we'll wait for the video to end.
What happens? With over 900,000 viewers at launch, Diablo 4's average daily Twitch viewership dropped dramatically to 4,000 viewers as of recording this video, which
I do want to say that this happens with Path of Exile as well. And there have even been the doomers. Have you read, like, I go on to PoE Reddit, right? Like, the doomers of the PoE Reddit, whenever a league doesn't hit the highest viewer count on Twitch, they, like, say, oh, dead league. Dead game. Well, they tried, but, you know, I just hope they can get things together for PoE too, because, you know, I mean, look at it's dead game.
I have things to say about the Twitch numbers. I do want to give him the benefit of the doubt and wait to see if he moves on from this. As for what Asmongold said specifically, while it is true that with ARPGs, well, first off, with any major game release, you're going to see a huge spike at launch and then a dramatic decrease. And it is true that in a cyclical game with seasons, you have a big launch at the season start and then a decline. That said, the decline that we see with D4 is steeper, and the numbers have dropped down lower. So there is some merit to looking at the Twitch numbers and saying things are grim. Like, I believe right now the average Twitch viewership of D4 in the middle of a season is worse than the average Twitch viewership of D3 in the middle of a season like a year or two ago. Another thing to bear in mind is the Twitch numbers for D4 were skewed because in that first month they had those promotions where you watch a streamer to get some free horse or something. So, but which was awesome for streamers. It was awesome for everyone, honestly. People got free cosmetics, streamers got, extra views, but that artificially inflated the Twitch numbers by a significant amount.
The amount of content surrounding Diablo 4 has declined on YouTube, and even its most popular videos about the game are about its decline or its mistake.
Okay, I really appreciate, actually. So, I like this guy. This Legendary Drops guy. I'm glad that he's doing what he's doing because he curtailed what I was about to point out. And that's when people just point to a single metric, Twitch views, as a measure of the health of a game and how well it's doing. And while there could be a correlation, and it could be that Twitch views are very well representative of a game's health, by itself, in a vacuum, Twitch numbers are almost meaningless. You need to look at a variety of sectors. And the reason for this was with Diablo 3, for instance, compared to PoE. PoE always, not always, in the last several years performed better. PoE performed better on Twitch than Diablo 3. And everyone would be like, oh, look at the Twitch numbers, D3 dead game, D3 dead game. But season after season after season on YouTube, D3 crushed PoE content. So just because something is more popular on Twitch does not mean it is a more popular or it is a game that is played by more people overall. Because some games just might not be as interesting to watch. D3 is a simple game. PoE, there's a lot of aspirational content that you want to watch because you can't do it yourself. I can't do that fight. I want to see how he does it, or I want to see stuff that I don't have access to. In D3, everyone could do everything. It's not hard. It's not complicated. It's not a whole lot to even learn. And because it's a shallower game, it also appeals to streamers less. If I had one single game to play for the rest of my life every day, it would be Path of Exile. Because that game could keep me for that long. No other game can do that right now. There's so much to do and learn and be excited about in PoE. And so yeah, if I'm going to be a streamer that streams 10 hours a day every day, I would much rather stream PoE because I'm not going to get bored. In D3, within 2 weeks, 3 weeks max, I'd be bored of the season. Now, doesn't mean the game is bad or I think it's a bad game. It's bad if what you want is fun for 10 hours every day for the rest of your life. But coming back to Legendary Drops here, again, I appreciate that he's now pointing out the other sectors in which we are also seeing that drop. And yes, every Diablo 4 YouTuber has felt a severe drop. And to point to my own videos as an example, with D3, when it was dead game, my tier list videos would still get like 500,000 views, if not more. No one in Season 2 of D4, a new game, is seeing anywhere close to those numbers anymore on guide content. Now, again, this is just one other vector of measuring a game's potential popularity. Could there be other reasons? Could it be maybe just YouTube overall is going down? Maybe there are other resources that people are using to look up guide content. Maybe TikTok has taken over. There could be any number of reasons for this. And while I will stand by the statement that we cannot claim that the numbers show that D4 players or the player base is going down. And again, there is no actual numbers out there to the public that anyone can point to. Anyone who's saying they see the numbers publicly somewhere on some website, that's not true. It's at best an estimate. The only people that know the true numbers are people who are in Blizzard HQ, who have looked into that server room and see the live numbers. Those are the only people that know. However, by every public and measurable vector of popularity that a non-Blizzard employee has access to, D4 numbers are not great right now. We're talking Twitch views, we're talking YouTube live views, we're talking YouTube videos, we're talking Google search interest. At least everything that I could think of looking at as a metric, all those numbers are down and lower than what D3 was a couple years ago. Another example, actually. We had the reveal of an expansion, right? Of a D4 expansion. And this was at BlizzCon. And I would have expected really big views on these kinds of videos. And they were beat out by, in 2016, this was 4 years after the launch of D3, 2 years after the launch of Reaper of Souls, D3 announced the Necromancer pack. And I remember the top performing video on that, 1 million views. And we didn't see anywhere close to that. And by comparison, on YouTube, I think the highest performing video we saw got like less than 500,000 for a full expansion. Now, again, maybe just all the views have moved to TikTok now. Maybe people aren't absorbing content the same way they were in 2016. These are all possible explanations. But when all of the numbers that we can point to, at least that the public sees, are all trending down, well, it's painting a certain picture.
Now, while many may believe that Twitch isn't the most accurate way to gauge active players,
this will be on the next video.
Games that definitely don't fit that mold, like Final Fantasy XIV, but ARPGs do fit that mold. When they are popular and are being played, there is content that's being created around them. And Diablo...
I actually think that ARPGs are hard to make content in, and they are inherently less interesting to watch. I think isometric games are also like kind of less compelling than like more free-form games.
Popularity is obviously waning when many of the creators in the space are turning to other games instead. The sentiment that I have...
Yeah. So I like that this guy is bringing up all the things, right? So I've seen arguments being made like this over the years, and he's the first to really explore it in a more nuanced and deliberate way that tackles the angles that I typically counter these arguments with. And if you want to be a content creator, the reality is that D4 content right now is not performing as well as D3 content did. Out of necessity, a lot of content creators are branching out to other games because it's not sustainable, or it's not as sustainable as it was to focus just on D4 content. Which is crazy because D3 had very little content on a seasonal basis, whereas D4 has it's a substantially deeper game. There is more content to be made about it. The updates on a season, there's so much more stuff, and yet the content, for whatever reason, just isn't performing as well when it comes to views, when all the metrics on our part as content creators.
And many other players is that of apathy. Sure, it would be cool if Diablo 4 was a good game, but I don't really care if it improves or not. There are a ton of other options, better options that...
Yeah, I'm not emotionally invested in the game improving either. Because if it doesn't improve, I can always play another game. I'm not worried about it, man. I hope they fix it, but if they don't, that's okay.
While Blizzard has attempted to address some of these issues in Season 2, the game's unstable player count and the community's ongoing concerns paint a challenging picture for Diablo 4.
I just think that they need to keep releasing seasons that just make the game a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
Do that for a year, and you're going to have a good game. That's just the truth.
And assuming that they resolve in a positive way the underlying issues that can just be solved with more content. We need more content, yes, and continuing to get more content. Again, give it 2 years and we're all going to have enough content. But the itemization rework, that's a big underlying pain point, and that's going to go one way or the other. Either that, like with Diablo 3, fixes the game, or it's not successful, and then who knows how much longer we need to wait in order to fix this. And the reality is some people are more patient than others. Some people are more loyal to the franchise than others. You know, I've been a lifelong Diablo fan. So Asmongold was just talking about how he has no emotional attachment to the game. I do. I can't help it. I've loved Diablo as long as I could remember. For over most of my life, I have loved and cared deeply about this franchise. And so I cannot help but be emotionally invested in wanting to see it succeed and be as good as it could possibly be. I love the world. I love the characters. I love that we got to see Lilith and Inarius. I want to see where the story is going to continue to go. And it's that love that makes me look past the game's flaws and the things that I don't like and hope that we continue to see improvement in that regard.
And that's the thing that really confuses me about all of this, is that their monetization people, their marketing people, their community managers should know what state the game is in, and charging these kind of prices, or even thinking about charging these kind of prices, doesn't make a lot of sense, especially in the eyes of the.
But they're not making those decisions. I mean, they're putting forth that feedback, but they're not making the decisions. And at the end of the day, it's the number crunchers that see, well, we can get away with this. And it's until they see that they can't get away with it that they'll change their minds on that.
Customer or the consumer, or whatever you want to call us, because we just don't see the value in that. They're looking at the money, but they're not thinking what they need to do to earn that money in the first place. If they're not stacking the game with content enough to be able to entice players to come back to playing the game, then it's just not going to work. And if you're going to...
Well, that's the thing. So you have two different entire teams. I don't know if you can call them teams. You have the people that are making the game, that are making that content, and their job is to make the game as good as it could possibly be. And then you have the other people whose job is to make money and price the game. And they're working under the assumption that that first team is doing a bang-up job, and that they're going to, and that by the time they release this product, it's going to be a 10 out of 10 perfect thing. And if that team comes and says, yeah, actually, you know, the community's not liking it, then the response is, well, fix it. Make it better. You have until the end of the year before this launches.
And this all has to do with the fact that they're just trying to force feed monetization into their game. And why I think this is happening is because they didn't make as much money off of the live service as they thought that they would, because the game lost its popularity immediately, evaporated. And
I'm really curious what those metrics are. I'm really curious to know how much money is being made on the cosmetics, on the live service.
Thin air.
Because that's the problem, is like, if you can't keep people playing the game, nobody's going to buy a microtransaction for a game they're not actively playing, right? So what you need to do is you need to keep people in the game so they want to buy the microtransactions.
Yeah, exactly.
Gone, which means you don't have people that are buying your platinum, that are buying your mounts, that are buying your skins, that are buying all of your other garbage that you want to sell them. And as such, they're looking to try to go in and squeeze for as hard as they can to try to get as much money as they can, because they probably over-invested in the game during its initial development.
I think they invested too much money into marketing, but that also could be because I have a blind spot for all of the people that they reached that I don't even see, right?
Yeah, no, marketing budgets in video games and Hollywood, like, at least in Hollywood, the figures, like, basically half of your budget is marketing, and this wouldn't be the baseline if it wasn't successful. So, I'm sure their marketing was very successful. I'm sure they got significant return on investment. I don't think D4 is in the red. $606 million within, what was it, like a month post-launch. D4, again, reached a ton of people out. I mean, it had to reach people outside of the ARPG genre. We are a niche. The fact that it got as many sales as it did is because of that marketing, is because of the big billboards, is because tons of streamers who don't play ARPGs were streaming it and sharing it with their audiences and fan bases.
Anyway, that's all I got for the video. Hope you guys enjoyed this.
Okay, so I do appreciate that this guy made a video that was not just reacting to what everyone was reacting to, and is discussing more. It's almost a philosophical approach to the worth of a game. I do like that he used well-reasoned arguments. I think he brings up a lot of great points. I do think fundamentally a lot of it does come down to it's personal whether you feel something is worth X or Y. So on that note specifically, how much do I think a Diablo 4 expansion is worth? Well, so first off, I don't remember what the base price of D4 was. Was it $70? If it was $70, then I don't believe an expansion of D4 is worth $70. Just, you look at the content. You're getting less content, right? What is an expansion going to include? Almost by definition, or at least historically by every expansion Blizzard has ever released, it's going to have less content in it than the base game. So if it's smaller than the base game, the price should also be smaller than the base game. That's just how I feel. But I don't think anyone would disagree with that you feel like you're getting ripped off if you're getting charged the same price for less content. I would be unhappy if the price of the expansion is the same as the price of the base game. Now, to clarify, I'm talking about the base price of the expansion, right? Some package needs to have just the expansion and no other fancy add-ons. And the survey, from what I saw, was more about all those fancy add-ons. So could there be some add-on pack that's $100? Yeah, that's fine. There could be an add-on pack that's $80,000. If people want to spend that on a game, then whatever. As long as the base entry fee should be fair. And as long as there's no pay to win where people feel like, oh, well, I have to spend more, otherwise I'm at a disadvantage. I'll also mention that I fully support anyone boycotting something based on whatever values they have. And I encourage people to, again, only buy things if they feel they're going to get value out of it, if they feel that they're going to get their money's worth out of it. Anyone who is upset with a pricing model of anything other than an essential in their lives ought not to spend that money. That's literally the only way that you're going to effectuate change is by saying no and not buying the thing. Because if enough people say no and don't buy the thing, then prices are going to start coming down, and it's the only way they're going to come down. And I know sometimes people throw out arguments like, well, you know, if they do good guy charity things, it builds up a lot of goodwill. That's nonsense, doesn't work. At the end of the day, greed is what has always been rewarded the most within this system. Yes, you can point to some examples of good guy business models that were met with some success, but for every one of those examples, there's 1,000 examples of greed eclipsing anything else. At the end of the day, the market decides, and people can complain all they want. If they still buy the thing, then the only message that's going through is, yes, please more.
Yeah, would you buy it if you weren't a streamer? It depends on how much money I had. Like, if I only had, like, let's say I had disposable income a month of $100, maybe $150, $200. Probably not. I'd wait.
That's exactly the thing, right? Like, whether something is worth buying always depends entirely on your life situation. When I was in college and working a part-time job to pay my college fees, I'd buy like one video game a year. And yeah, damn right, I want it to be the best video game with the most content that can keep me busy for an entire year because I can't afford to spend money on entertainment. But compare that to someone who's spending $10 at Starbucks every day, is paying $50 a month on various streaming services, is buying 3 new video games every month, then yeah, it's a very different situation. All right, so those are my thoughts on this, but again, I encourage you folks to check out the original 2 videos. The Legendary Drops video, he goes into more detail about some of his points. He also gives more of a history of what has happened with Diablo 4. Asmongold's reaction as well, he gives a lot more thoughts on what Path of Exile is doing and the right way to do certain things. So certainly merit in still watching these other 2 videos, or at the very least going by and giving them a thumbs up. There's a lot of easy rage baiting hate content for D4, but I think that Legendary Drops did a really good job with this video here. Again, well-researched, well-reasoned, well-thought out, well-expressed. And I respect his thoughts and his decision to not want to buy the expansion. And so that's going to wrap up this video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please share it, check out these other videos, and subscribe to join Rhykkers Raiders for more gaming content.